Welcome to Modern Mythology, a podcast that explores the many intersections of story and system. In every episode, we will discuss some facet of how RPGs function as modern myths, providing a shared canvas for creativity and the collaborative discovery of new worlds. For more information about this episode, articles, or links to our other related projects, visit modernmythology.net. Episode 5, Whispering Vault Actual Play and a Discussion of Structure.
I wanted to talk about structure. Obviously, Whispering Vault has a certain structure. We've seen other games that we've been playing
it's
so
kind
far.
Of built into the concept too.
It's built into the concept, and that it's a very clear structure. There's a couple games that do it, but I want to talk a little bit about that. And then consequently, also the themes. There's some recurring themes that we're going to see because we're going to explore Invisible Sun, we're going to explore Cult, we're going to explore Fallen Cycle, and then of course this is another one that has these very similar, illusory world, the world of spirit versus what we see, right? And how a game sort of interacts with that.
Yeah, and I also observed that it's this game starts with the weird, whereas a lot of the other games you mentioned, not all of them, but a lot of them start with the mundane, and then kind of start folding in the weird as it goes. Whereas this one's like you start in your domain, as a sort of alien being.
I think that's so. Let's talk about that first.
I thought that was amazing. I thought it was my sense that there is this world of essence, and that you almost have godlike powers and influence and knowledge, and you can move through time, and mortality isn't an immediate concern. I thought it was amazing, and I thought even my character and his ability to flow through, and everything comes to him in servitors and floating around to him in books and knowledge. I live my own life very similar to that. Obviously I'm not a god, and obviously it's going to flow around me, but that those are the things that occupy my spaces, and so it was it was a sense of transcendence into a place where for me it was a sense of transcendence into a space that I'd like to occupy.
I'm used to doing it the other way, where I kind of teach the players or discover myself as a player sort of how the world works in a process of starting out in the mundane, and you start folding in these things, so you kind of are learning the system or the structure at the same time as your character is developing. That's my default. But I like it, especially for kind of throwing into it quickly, because with the Fallen Cycle, with some couple of these games, World Darkness does this too, where it's you don't know sort of the supernatural. Even if you as a player know how the system handles the supernatural, you kind of have this sort of conceit that your character doesn't.
Right. Well, that's kind of interesting too, because while that's true for the games that you run, and for instance, very likely something similar to what Mark's going to do with Hunter, interestingly enough, the other side of Storyteller does just the opposite, right? Because if you're playing a vampire or a werewolf or a wraith,
with vampires, a lot of times you're starting out as a fledgling vampire, and so you still don't know that world that much. You're kind of just coming in.
Sure, but you know that you're a vampire. Supernatural exists, right? And there are certainly a very common trope in those games is to run a session zero, to run a little narrative about when you turned, right? When you became a vampire, when you discovered your werewolf.
Or even a little kind of mini pre-campaign almost.
Right. A little prequel or whatever the case is. Invisible Sun's interesting because you do start in Saturnine, and you might know more or less about the world of Invisible Sun, but there are a lot of people who do have this inclination, very, very common, this inclination to start in shadow, and that I'm going to go through my little shadow world, and then what is that reveal like?
That's probably my inclination normally.
Right, but having run it a few times now, I actually can say that I think it actually works better if you start in Saturnine and flash back to that stuff. But yeah, I think that's interesting. Now, this is a horror game, but the weirdness is not the horror.
Yeah.
something that I think is profoundly interesting, probably my absolute favorite show of all time is Lovecraft Country. And what I love about Lovecraft Country is being somebody who, like, my career is in studying race relations, and the idea that in Lovecraft Country, the horror for the white people is the supernatural stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
And the horror for the African Americans is United States culture, right? Is the idea of how terrifying it is to just drive across the country by yourself as an African American, right? And I love that. Like, there are points where the supernatural horrors kind of, affect the African American characters, but by and large, they're usually not really affected by the supernatural. They're really affected by this fucked up world around them, which I think is fascinating. And it's like an interesting juxtaposition in terms of where we're starting all of the narrative.
Where would you say the horror lies in Whispering Vault, you think?
So it's interesting. Most of it is through the instructions to the GM. A lot of it is in the context of the navigator is a giant worm that's going to eat you, right? It's meant to be like evocative. It's meant to be horrific. There's some body horror there. There's some the unbidden, very, very, and I leaned into it for this, very Hellraiser, Cenobite-esque, right? Where like there's this hellscape, and it's what Cult you guys are going to see when we run Cult. What Cult kind of leans into that, that when the illusion goes away, everything is horrific and crazy, right? Yeah. When I first came across Whispering Vault, Nightbreed, Clive Barker's Nightbreed had come out, and that was what this sort of evoked, that it's horror, but it's sort of action horror.
Right. And Whispering Vault, like, because of your position, like, you don't have that element of horror where you're kind of the, like, you don't have much, I call it Cthulhu style or whatever, where you don't have that much power in the context of what's going on. In this, at least, you're dealing with beings that might be as powerful, even more powerful than you, but you're still this being. You're like, so you don't have that element of horror.
But I do think it is interesting though, because I do feel like it's otherworldly, and I think that's where it set the tone. I agree, it is action. Yeah, is it directly horror, or is it more like a thriller? Because you are powerful and you do have options, and you do have these almost godlike powers in other ways. So that does change the dynamics a little bit. But I do think, like, the idea of hitting him, and like Don says, this thing leaps, is bent over and then leaps up and then goes on his high heels like Michael Jackson. Like, we're not expecting him to do a breakdance at that point. We're like, this is going to get ugly some other way.
Well, and also we'll mention this often. The weakness of our format is that we're not playing campaigns.
Right.
We have campaigns.
You don't get the story element, which is like my favorite part of it.
But like there are bigger and better things than us, right? And then the stalkers, and the idea, like, one of the elements that I find really intriguing is like mortals' interactions with the world of essence, and that they seem like they are, first off, that's where some of the horror comes in, right? You're empathizing with these normal people who are now being taken over by this Cenobite, right? But consequently, there's some mortals who, like, get this faintest sense of what the realm of essence is like, and can do things like literally summon stalkers. And so, being this being of essence, you do have this weakness, right? This like compulsion to you're part of this system, right? Which is a lack of agency and stuff like that, where I think is also part of it. Like, there's a creep factor, which again is meant to be evocative and part of the descriptions, right? And there's some sort of sense of like, where are things coming from? Like where is the attack? Where is the mystery? You know, one game I would love for you guys to play is Dogs in the Vineyard.
Yeah, you've mentioned that. I haven't played it. Yeah.
Not for horror. It's another, but it's another game that has this sort of like ritual involved where you're trying to find the source of evil in a village, right? You're these Western paladins trying to root out evil village to village to village. And it's a similar thing. Another game I have not played enough of called Polaris literally starts with lighting a candle. And so some of these games, I've always been really drawn to these games that have this structure to it. You know, the first piece of structure that really strikes me is everyone knows what they're supposed to do.
Do you consider setting a part of structure?
Is setting a part of structure?
I have a reason for asking, but I'm curious.
Give me an example.
Well, okay, so like a lot of times in what we've been exploring and in games I've played and so on, like a lot of genre and a lot of sort of like those sort of assumptions comes from what you know about the setting that you're playing in rather than directly from the system. Right? But there are, of course, elements of the system that should play into it. Like you're playing something where a survival game is relevant, then you want to have sort of survival game rules underneath it. But a lot of it, I'm just wondering if you think the structure is setting as part of that. I mean, I think it is in a way, but I'm curious if you think of it that way.
I mean, that's part of social contract, right? If you're playing a horror game, and Whisper involved, regardless of the ritual involved and Whisper involved, there is that sense of we know what we're doing, so therefore that drives our decision making.
It's like assumptions about the world.
Right,
kind of what I mean by setting.
If I, in a cyberpunk setting, I know I can make cell phone calls. If I'm in 1920s, I can't make cell phone calls. So it definitely informs the players and GMs what's possible and what's not possible. So in the scope of how I use structure and what I think structure is useful for, yes.
Yeah,
you know,
that's how I think about it too. Because some people think of structure very kind of like this. Scenes are part of the structure, and the rules are part of the structure. But something like setting is too aesthetic, is too surface for it to be. But I think it's all kind of in terms of how we actually play these games. I think it's kind of an amalgam, really.
Yes, and right, and you're talking about. I think there's sort of like implicit structure and explicit structure.
I guess it's right. Yeah.
So your implicit structures are like we're playing D&D, right, and the general mechanics are structure. I know this is a big, not problem for me, but like a suspension of disbelief is broken for me in something like D&D, where I know I have 120 hit points and I can take as much damage as 120 hit points and then 0 and then I drop and that's it. And that's not endearing to me. That's not something that I like.
This doesn't inform you in a way that's kind of beneficial to
it breaks my immersion. If you're ever going to have a game like that have immersion, you have
to add something.
It doesn't pull me in. I'm much more like, and I always say this about Burning Wheel, and we'll absolutely play Burning Wheels down the line. Good. I always say this about Burning Wheel is like, it's astonishing to watch Burning Wheel players, because in a D&D game, if someone levels a crossbow at you, right, you'd be like, it's 8 points of damage. Who the fuck cares? Right? Yeah. Most of us, even at first level, can handle 8 points of damage.
Right.
You're a wizard, right? But in Burning Wheel, everybody puts their hands up.
Right.
Because that shit will kill you, right? It can easily, with one die roll, easily just take you out.
Yep.
And as a crossbow could.
Right.
And so it's really interesting that you say that both setting creates this structure, but consequently just raw mechanics
also does.
Also can create this implicit structure. And then we've been playing, and we're going to continue to play games that have this explicit structure of this is the way seams are formed. This is how the game progresses.
Right.
There's a lot of different pieces. We've seen Blades in the Dark has downtime. We did downtime actions. How do you guys feel about that having, because I know, Mark, for you, these are kind of new for you.
Well, no, these are where I prefer to be, because one of the things that we're talking about is the structure. Specifically here, when you're talking about a fantasy structure, you're talking about heroes typically, and the role of a hero in a fantastical world, even if they're their alignment is chaotic evil.
Right.
It's still hero structure. Versus in these worlds, because it's horror by definition, you should be vulnerable. You should be taken out with one powerful blow by a bad villain. That's the nature of the horror experience. The guy shows up behind you and hits you with the meat cleaver. You're going to die.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it. I think I enjoy this environment better, specifically through Coriolis. Hunter that I'm working on, and then the all these games, the violence has to be real, and the violence and the intensity of the game experience for me is directly affected by your how much you're have at risk.
So those are implicit structures, right? Coriolis doesn't have any particular structure hanging around it, nor does horror generally, but what about like these two games that you've played thus far, Whispering Vault and Blades in the Dark? Like, Blades has this specific thing where you start immediately in the score, and then anything you want to do outside the score happens in flashbacks.
Yeah, I love that structure. I love the flashbacks. I thought that was really creative, and I have to say that's one of the things that's made doing this podcast series fun is stepping into these very different worlds. Even the dreamlike world, I felt like the entire time I was walking around in a really uncomfortable dream. This world having the really interesting twist of almost being a godlike creature who's going to step across the rift to protect the flesh form was also just a fascinating little step into these other worlds. So I really enjoyed that, and the structure of them, like you said, starting from the world of essence and having to go into the flesh world. Like that was an
every
journey.
game. I mean, you can break the formula a little bit, but every game sort of follows that path.
Yeah.
Like I said, I totally would have a bell.
Right.
If I was going to run Whispering Vault, I would absolutely.
Yeah, it makes it like a ritual.
Ding,
I totally dig that. One thing I think interesting is in my experience of Whispering Vault didn't feel very it felt action horror, but like definitely. But I think part of it, even though I didn't have a lot of investment in this character, I was just introduced this character just now. I still was kind of in my head, like in my character's place, and like with her, it's like there could be demons all around her, and she knows what she has to do, and she's not afraid, even if it kills her. So like that was kind of my mentality with it. So I said horror, but I think that's part of the character in it too, and it still supports the framework of it being horror.
Right. And likewise with my character, I felt the same, which is that I'm torn, right? Because I've experienced the madness. My character has suffered this horror, but is also trying to maintain the balance of the two worlds. So so I really enjoyed the structure of him having this beautiful life that he's living over there, but then putting it at risk to maintain the balance. I thought that structure was served well.
And so I'm hoping. My hope is that this sort of informs other games too. It certainly informs my other games that I'm always looking for, whether it be a 3-act, kind of structure that I impose on a lot of my games. Invisible Sun, you have this sort of structure imposed on the idea of drawing a Sooth card. And so the Sooth card, every scene also kind of informs
influences that scene.
Influences that scene, which we're going to see it at some point in time. But developing some sort of focused setting for D&D is always going to be something that I'm always going to go for. A lot of times it's some sort of dungeon world kind of. I don't mean dungeon world
literally,
the apocalypse game. I mean the old 1980s series of Dungeon World, where it's a world of a dungeon and you're just living in a dungeon. That's what you do. Or Delicious in Dungeon, right? Delicious in Dungeon has this great framework of there's the dungeon,
Yeah. I was amused by how literal it is in a way.
TM.
Yeah, it's like one of the few series. Like, there's a lot of series and shows and stuff that are clearly informed by RPGs, but they usually try to focus on the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but like the Delicious in Dungeon is very much like you get the sense like this is like the like in world, in character version of like people sitting around a table playing an RPG.
An
kind
RPG,
of, you know?
right?
You can almost feel those rules underneath it, even though apparently the creators and this.
No, but it's very cool when they're like the idea that you have multiple parties going into various sections, and have you been to that section before? Like there's a game called X-Crawl that's very similar in terms of there's this sense of like it's like a capitalist entertainment layer on top of this, like the dungeons. So you're like, well, there's dungeons and there's adventures. We might as well make it a game show. It's like what it is. There was a game I'm very, very fond of back in the day called The Hunt. And which is funny because that's what the process of getting the unbidden is called in this is the hunt, but more like Wild Hunt than than what I'm going to talk about. And the idea is that you are hunters and you guys are like crazy and you have sort of Slay Industries-esque where they throw criminals into this maze and then you get to go hunt the criminals, sort of like Running Man-esque, and it, again, that's you're not, it's not sandboxy at all, other than we were talking about this with Rune, right? Like where you can narrow the narrative, but still give your players the sense of I'm in control of what's going on.
Yeah, having that structure it can be useful, certainly. And of course, if it becomes rote, if it start to get tedious or something, you can always change it up for a session or a couple sessions and it can make it feel really fresh again to come back to that pattern, Yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny because there's actually a lot of points and a lot of advice in Whispering Vault that talks about breaking the formula.
Right.
But it's funny because it's like, but you really kind of I wanted to make certain I ran something that was on the formula.
Right. Start with
like, I feel like you have to do that 2-3 times before you start.
I mean, this is a kind of good rule with creating plots with people in RPG generally anyways, is to like, you got to establish something before you break it. And if you're going to break something, then you want to reestablish something else. And it's that sort of interplay, I think, that can keep things fresh.
Right.
Right.
Cool. Anything else we want to add to that?
I just want to talk real quick about we're kind of thinking about the idea of the sort of of the like illusory world versus the real world appearing in these different things. I mean, you mentioned the Matrix when we were talking before we started recording. It's a good example of it, that sort of basis in Gnosticism and goes back to Platonism. You don't have to go into Platonic philosophy or Neo-Platonic.
Thank you very much for reminding me of that. Yeah, like wondering where that narrative comes from. Because we see it in a lot of things. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of idea of like that, is that imaginal world more or less real than our world? That's like a function of it, Yeah,
and I'm wondering if like where it is Plato's cave? Like, is that the source?
In terms of origins, Plato's cave was dealing with that question, right? And so I'm pretty sure there were pre-Socratic even versions of it, and certainly in the Eastern traditions, there's also quote unquote Eastern traditions. There's versions of that too, and different kind of. The Bardo realms or like the Buddhist, versions of those other worlds and things like that. And of course, in that perspective, they're all illusory, right?
Right. It's ostensibly the nature of occultism, right? Is secrets, right? Is this idea of revelation? Is this idea that you're playing, and when I say playing, I mean living in a world that has these inner meanings that just need to be revealed to you. And I guess that's maybe this interesting intrinsic narrative core that we're kind of seeking.
And like in Mage, it's in being awakened.
Well,
which is pretty hard. They're pretty, especially in the earlier versions, they're very emphatic about that. Although that does create this sort of dichotomy of sort of like, the sleepers, right? And you can kind of look down on the sleepers, and that can become a whole thing either in game or it's like problematic out of thing, right? Exactly,
Because you're seeing the same thing, I'm assuming, Mark, in Hunter, in that.
Very much so.
I don't want you to spoil anything, but are the players going to start in the know, or is that going to be
revealed? By definition, in the Hunters, the characters begin in the know. They've already had some experience, but it's also isolated them. It's pushed them towards the edge, the edge or the fringes of society, because they have this information and they can't shake it. And it's a very isolated
you share it with people and they think you're crazy.
They think you're crazy, and so this and in Hunters the Reckoning, it is a cell structure to begin with. So it's the few people sitting in a room who know the truth, and everybody else out there is sleepwalking through their life,
and that can really bond the group together, which is really useful for an RPG.
Deeply bond the group together. And there are people out there who also are sympathetic to them, which helps, but it does definitely create we're in a know and a sense of isolation and despair.
Yeah. Now, I can't remember exactly which version, but I do know that there was a version of Hunter at one point where they default was to start you not in the know. I think it was like one of the New World of Darkness version. There's so many different versions of White Wolf to World of Darkness, the Chronicles.
New World of Darkness that started that, because Reckoning is the first one.
Okay.
So it's.
I'm just curious. I'd be curious to see how they play differently. Not saying maybe to do that right now, but just kind of my own sort of thing.
You'll find out pretty soon.
Interestingly enough, like we're always talking about like the supernatural. Obviously, if you really think about it, I mean, Matrix is totally supernatural. The Matrix is just a technological explanation of why there are supernatural things. Right.
It's kind of like it's like Neoplatonic Gnosticism meets like simulacra and simulation from Baudrillard,
But a departure of that would be something like Aliens, right? Alien and Predator, where you're starting not in the know, and then you're revealed to the horrors of aliens.
Part of the horror. If you go in it kind of like knowing it kind of changes that.
Right. Interestingly enough, I definitely see Predator as being closer to Whispering Vault of being action horror.
I
think it's definitely horror. I definitely think it's like you're fighting these crazy aliens that are bigger and stronger and better than you are. I really enjoyed the Adrian Brody Predators version, where it's a bunch of people that the Predator scooped up and dropped on a planet, and then to be hunted. And like,
it definitely does seem like a setup for a game.
100%, right? 100%. And it was still, I would say, horrific, but you're right. There is a different level of horror. It's
a different type.
It's a different type of horror. When you have some control, there is different horror. There is horror where the protagonist ends the incident sort of crawling and screaming and bloody and barely, and the big bad may or may not be dead. But then there's definitely the horror out there.
I can't remember off the top of my head what game it is, but I know at least one game, probably more, where it's some sort of implicit premise, or maybe even explicit, where it's like one of you is going to survive.
One of you is going to survive.
That's such a horror trope.
I mean, I always have stables for Call of Cthulhu because,
but I feel like in Aliens, by definition, is if the group makes it through Aliens and everybody's happy and hunky dory, you did not have
something is wrong.
We're doing something wrong. And it's interesting. I think a world in its own right. Mark, have you played Blade Runner?
No, I haven't played it
yet.
But I read it pretty closely, and I'm looking forward to playing it, and we'll definitely hit it since I haven't played it.
I love that setting, so
I think the setting is actually pretty interesting. I'm very curious if it could be interesting outside an alien. You know what I mean? Like a xenomorph.
So that's an interesting question, because the game is not, quote, an action game. It's not about running around and shooting each other or having lots of combat. It's actually about exploring the world and the questions that Blade Runner asks. So I think when we play that, that's going to be very interesting for us because
I'm curious to see how the rules try to engage with that.
Because when you're in that world and you're asking these questions that we're now all confronted with in this very technological society that we're in, where are the lines? Where are there lines? Yeah. And where does life begin? And if something is created by us, is it its own line?
Who's a replicant or who's a Cylon?
No, it's a little beyond the topic of horror.
But again, there's that revelation. There's that sense of like, I'm just an average schmo and I'm going to have my disposable rain jacket on and because it never stops raining. And I'm going to go eat noodles at this floating kiosk, and over time, I'm going to find out the corporate conspiratorial, essence of the world that I live in.
In that way, I guess the two are. It is similar to Alien because there's like that ongoing question in Alien of like, obviously the xenomorphs are opponents and they're not good, quote unquote, but like the corporation in a way is like kind of like the baddie.
The big bad, right?
But it's really asking. I mean, the deeper question is it really humans that are more interested in screwing over, whether it's corporate structure or not? I mean, like we can kind of see it in our current day and age. Like, we can be pretty fucking evil.
Right. Cool. So, no, I think that's great. I think thinking about where in our games, where we have those revelations, how we set that up can absolutely be part of the structure. I think it's important to understand pacing. I don't think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I don't think you can have a game where like the first 6 sessions is just you working at McDonald's,
Right.
Like you can't,
like our COD thing. Like, it's like you can start there, but you do have to build.
You got to get there quickly. You can't. You have to. That's it's when I talk about a 3-act structure. Like I always think about inciting incidents.
Right.
If nothing else. If someone doesn't get anything else out of this, our goal conversation is a big piece where you're like, where is that goal set? Yeah. So how am I going to solve this in 1 session? Am I going to solve it in 5 sessions? But then bangs. So what bangs are, for anybody who doesn't know, is this idea that you're pulling from characters a inciting incident, a point in time where we're going to just start the action, and it can be a little bit of a slow burn. A lot of movies are, but a lot of times you don't have to do in media res, but like to some degree, it's like you're in the middle of this conflict. Yeah. What do you do, right? To really just
get it going.
Get the wheels going.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's like, my thing I kind of mentioned earlier is like, it's balancing those things. It's like if you do constant, what are you doing? That becomes repetitive. But then if you're doing like the stretching it out, like forever, so it's like kind of trying to find the pace in the session, in the moment, and over the course of a campaign even. Yeah. Like, of kind of trying to flip it on people, establish the pattern, break the pattern.
Have I mentioned Cyberpunk Red? Yeah. That he has an alternating thing, and it seems trite, but it's exactly, it's one scene is an action scene, one scene's not, one scene's
right. And it doesn't always have to be prescriptive in that way, but if you exactly. If you need that help, then you got it, right?
Cool. I do that. I mean, I do structure a pacing to it, and I do the 1 scene action, 1 scene break, 1 scene action. Now doing that for the horror because that's a different what's in. So I do think in a game like Coriolis, which can be horror, but it can also be space adventure.
Coriolis is my go-to horror game.
I get it. Yeah, I totally get it. But again, but I do think like in that there was, for me, it was when I structured those, it's break, action, break, action.
Yeah, even movie editing is that way too. If you ever see a movie that they're kind of cut down on time, so they cut out a lot of those sort of breathing scenes, and it's just like hitting you over the head.
Know who paced it really well? If you guys haven't seen Bullet Train, Bullet Train is paced very well. It's frenetic. and fast paced, but the editing really is crisp. Everything is where it belongs, and it's good. You know, it just going back to horror, I definitely think I like a pacing structure. If you think about horror in terms of like tension building and release, and tension building and release becomes really important, right? So it's like once you have that explosion and that big problem, you need a breather.
Yeah.
Right? To some degree, yes, to get back into some sort of normalcy, but sometimes it's like to lull the characters into some false sense of like, is everything all right? You know?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Let me give you a very brief rundown of Whispering Vault. Whispering Vault is basically a procedural horror game. It is of the milieu of the world is not what you think it is. This world is actually the dream of these beings called the aesthetics. And the aesthetics are all have roles within society or within reality. There's this big cycle, and so what happens is like a new world is ostensibly created in the cycle, right? So and so what happens is sometimes an aesthetic gets fixated on a part of the dreaming and decides to leave their post and enter the world of flesh to experience, you know, their creation, right? We are mortals, or you are mortals who have experienced the unbidden in various ways. You are mortals who interacted with the supernatural world, what's called the realm of essence. This is the realm of flesh. And what you've done is you have been conscripted by the powers that be. They're called primal powers. Primal powers are basically sort of like gods and entities that transcend the cycle. Okay? And to basically hunt down unbidden and return them to the Whispering Vault.
I like that.
So our characters remember that, like know that already?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And I mean, you could conceivably have a game where you discover it, but it's, you know, it's not necessarily part of the process.
Right.
Interestingly enough, it's so funny how that trope is repeated so many times. Fallen Cycle, Matrix, Cult. We're going to play Cult
concept.
Yeah, and the Gnostic, and then of course this. So it's and even Invisible Sun, right?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So here are the four possibilities I have for you guys. You're going to choose one, right? Mara the Unforgiving. Mara was once a warrior in ancient Mesopotamia, known for her relentless pursuit of justice after her family was murdered by a cult. Her pursuit led her to discover the unseen and the unbidden's influence over mortals. She was chosen after her mortal life ended in tragedy, her desire for vengeance transforming into a deep sense of duty to protect reality itself.
Okay.
That's one possibility. The next possibility is Elion, the Dreamwalker. Elion was a philosopher during the Italian Renaissance, obsessed with unlocking the mysteries of the human mind and its connection to the dream. His visions of otherworldly realms led him to study the unseen, eventually attracting the attention of the stalkers. Elion was chosen after a life of isolation and madness, as he constantly dreamt of the rift and the entities that lurked beyond.
I like Elion.
And the last one is Astrid, the Echo of a Forgotten Time. Astrid was a scientist in the early 20th century, obsessed with time and the possibility of controlling it. Her experiments led to her discover the existence of the rift, where time did not flow the way it did in the physical realm. Unfortunately, her tampering with time attracted the unbidden, and she was caught in a temporal paradox of her own making.
So this doesn't take place in our world. This takes place in their world?
So
because they're in our world and we're trying to hunt them down.
They're in our world.
Okay.
We're going to start the game in the realm of essence, and then you'll travel to the realm of flesh to hunt the unbidden. And you'll notice that when you go back and forth, you don't necessarily know what time period, right? So you're all from different time periods, and then you could go to any particular time period, right? Just based on when you're called to the hunt.
I might go with Mara. That would be interesting.
I think I'm going to take Elion.
You're going to take Elion. Elion and Mara. Awesome. Okay, so Elion the Dreamwalker, I told you what his background, right? He was a philosopher in the Italian Renaissance. He was chosen after his isolation led him to madness. His avatar, so this is what, in the realm of essence, what your avatar looks like. Elion's avatar is a lithe, graceful figure with pale skin covered in glowing, dreamlike tattoos that shift and change. He has a long, flowing robe that seems to shimmer with stars, and his eyes reflect distant, unreachable worlds. His domain, so this is basically the little sub-realm, the little mini-realm within the realm of essence that you live. Your domain is an ethereal library of floating books and scrolls that seems to write and rewrite themselves, representing the vast knowledge he has acquired over his many lifetimes. All right, your attributes. You have 4 attributes: awareness, insight, presence, and willpower. Your awareness is 5, your insight is 7, your presence is 3, and your willpower is 7. And I'll explain what they do in a minute.
You go over mine too.
Disciplines. Awareness gives you 5 disciplines. Delve. Delve is to read the minds of mortals. Translocate is to move instantly across space, basically teleportation. Weave is you get to heal damage in your vessel. Your vessel is your physical body in the realm of flesh. Conjure is you could create small objects from nothing. And dissipate is you can move through physical obstacles, phasing, right? Like Kitty Pryde. You also have 3 servitors. You have glimmer gaunts that makes objects translucent to pass through them, so you can phase objects also. These are beings that you summon, by the way. Servitors are beings that you summon, and they will do your bidding. Let's see. Also, trackers find creatures of essence, so it lets you find ghosts and spirits and things like that. Flits reduce the damage caused by ranged weapons. So they basically get in the way, right, when somebody tries to shoot you. Every character has what are called every stalker has the 5 keys of humanity. These are the things that are basically holding you and keeping you grounded to being a stalker. Because what you guys are doing is actually pretty significant, because you're basically saying that you're willing to leave the realm of essence to become mortal, right? So that you can traverse the realm of flesh and hunt down these beings, which is a huge deal, you know? Right, you have 5 keys, right? And I'm going to give you 4 of them. Okay. One is a virtue. It's curiosity.
Is it for both of us, or just for his character?
Just for his character. Your unquenchable thirst for knowledge. You have a flaw, which is obsession, your tendency to prioritize knowledge over all else. Memory is the first vision you had of the dreaming, which led you to this isolation and eventual madness. And then the fifth one is called the fifth key. And the fifth key is always compassion. So you all have a drive to help others, sort of like that sort of bodhisattva kind of mentality of like, you know, I'm doing this to make certain other people, you know. Mara was once a warrior, entered Mesopotamia. Her pursuit led her to discover the unseen and unbidden influence over mortals. She was chosen after her mortal life ended in tragedy, her desire for vengeance transforming into a deep sense of duty to protect reality itself. There's some sort of sense that the unbidden was responsible for her and her family's death, and then like now she's gonna return.
Driven by vengeance, sure.
Her avatar, Mara's avatar, is a towering figure with dark twisted armor made of shadowy metal that constantly shifts. Her face is obscured by a mask. Her eyes glow with a faint red light. She has large skeletal wings that appear burnt at the edges, symbols of her relentless nature.
Is she always in armor? Like the armor is like basically a part of her?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, stalkers are that's what this is your avatar. This is what you look like. This is your true form, right? Her domain is a wasteland of ruins with an endless storm raging overhead, a reflection of her inner turmoil and the devastation she seeks to prevent. Your attributes: awareness 6, insight 5, presence 4, and willpower 7. Disciplines: you have rend. You can make ranged attacks. Dominate is to impose your will on mortals and spirits alike. Morph, you could shape your vessel to adapt to different forms.
So like shape change, basically?
Yep.
Sure.
Ward allows you to protect yourself and your allies. And Savage allows you to do extra damage in melee combat. Servitors. You have 4 servitors. You have dreadworms, frighten groups of mortals with their presence.
Another frighten effect.
Yep. Rippers tear the husks off of minions. So much like you'll have a vessel that is like a flesh formed around you as you pass into the realm of flesh, minions, which are the unbidden's lackeys, often will have a husk, some sort of mortal form. And rippers reveal those husks. Slashers are brutal attackers that target everything in their area. They're basically like an AoE.
Mm-hmm.
And then spinners weave invisible webs to ensnare enemies. Your keys. Your first key is justice, her desire to protect the innocent. Duty, your dedication to your role as a stalker. Vengeance, your inability to forgive those who wronged her. You have a memory, which is the murder of your family, the event that drives you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, compassion. So you have all 5. Mark, you have 1 that you can kind of play with, you know? All right. So we're ready to start. The system is actually really pretty simple, okay? Interestingly enough, you know, we were talking about system, Jamie,
mm-hmm.
and interestingly enough, the rules to the system are the lion's share are for damage.
Right.
It's like this weird thing of like how you damage and what the effects of damage are to the various iterations of beings. Right? So like shadows are different than minions, are different than stalkers, are different than the unbidden, are different than mortals. Right? All 5 of those interact with damage slightly differently. Just understand that getting to 0 is bad, right? Mm-hmm. That's the important part. How the dice work. however many, whatever, you're going to do a roll generally based on your 4 attributes, right? There are physical attributes that comes later for a different reason. Okay. So you have those 4 attributes, whatever that number is, you roll that many dice.
Okay. So it's like a dice pool system
It's a die pool system.
Sure.
All right. Now you're picking either the top die or the top pair of dice. In other words, matches. Right? So if you roll a 6, it's going to be a 6. But if you roll 2 4s, it's going to be an 8. Mm-hmm. And then you add your skill.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then it just has a standard difficulty. I set difficulties, right? It's interesting that the game very specifically says you're setting difficulties based on what works for the story. Like, this is a horror game. It should be difficult. It should, it's a little bit of a grind, it should be evocative. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the advice in the book are aiming towards specifically doing that, So, again, definitely in the era of, GM is, God thing, All right. So how we start? Let's see here. Who wants to hear the call? I think it's going to be Elion.
I think so.
So how do you spend your time in your domain?
Oh, doing research.
Doing research.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Like studying the tides,
And maybe like, are you interested more in like the world, the realm of essence? Are you interested in like the expression of the realm of flesh? Like what's some of Elion's interest now? Balance.
He's interested in a balance between the world of the flesh and essence. And, because he understands that I was imbalanced, that took him and sent him down the spiral of madness.
Right.
So
right.
But he's also concerned that if the balance is not maintained or the balance is, corrupted, that the world of the flesh could further be corrupted. And he's trying to balance it by making sure that he keeps the enigma strong.
Awesome. You have a set of scales. There's a dais. You're amidst a number of floating books around you that you and some of your servitors are like, beings that, are flitting back and forth, maybe bringing you, and these are manifestations. They're literally just how your brain processes information, right? It could take any form, but to some degree, especially the keys, and they are physical keys, right? They can look however you want, but the most common form of them are physical keys, right? And the idea of like unlocking pieces of your personalities, right? Your keys can be actually stolen, they can be lost, but you can call them to you anytime because they're literally part of you. You see on the scale that there are these items in the scale, and in one scale there is an ornate ivory crucifix, and in the other scale there is a heart, and the heart is bleeding and bleeding over the edge, and very slowly, almost imperceptibly dissolving, like it's deflating a little bit. It's still pumping, and you could see that the scale is like groaning. You can like, even in this realm of essence, you can like feel the pathos of these two things going back and forth, and you're instantly drawn to this vision of a woman and her mother arguing. You can't tell quite what they're saying. It's all in like peanut speech, like wow, 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 wow. And there's arguing, and the mother storms out, and the daughter, adult daughter, maybe like 20s, right, is crying, her mascara is running, and she just collapses to her knees and is just asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
That is the calling, right? You know that you are being called because this symbolizes not only this mortal's plea, but symbolizes her struggling under the yoke of the enigma of a tear in the rift, right? Called an enigma, okay? And that is what you're chosen to fix, right? What the first thing you do, the first part of this process, so this is a big ritual, right? If I were to run this game, I would have a gong or a bell as each stage of this happens, right? It's sort of designating that a new scene happens. So this next scene is you bringing Mara to your domain. How do you envision that? Do you want to call her? Do you summon her? Is she just there upon the call, both of you sort of heeding it? How do you envision that happening?
I feel like it would be a call. I feel like it would almost be a shimmer of light. It's a tear or an opening, not necessarily a tear. And Mara stepping through.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine Mara's playing, there's this cheesy movie, The One, I think, with Jet Li. But at the end of it, he's just fighting endlessly. And I kind of imagine her domain kind of being this sort of almost holodeck, kind of fight scene where she's just kind of training constantly.
Right.
So I feel like it takes me a moment to show up for a call. And
then there's this light that starts emerging, and
does a couple combatants get pushed through?
I step through and crush them and step through.
Step through. Awesome. The juxtaposition between these two individuals is stark, right? You're about light, knowledge, and so it's a word, which is going to be very interesting when we enter into the realm of flesh. All right, so you understand the problem, right? The bell goes off, and the next piece is navigation. So now you have to get from the realm of essence to the realm of flesh, which you do through beings called navigators. Mara, how do you want to summon the navigator? It can look however you want it to. It could be in any form that you're interested in. How does she bring the navigator to bear?
The first thing that comes to mind is she cuts herself pretty deeply. It doesn't actually hurt, and kind of the blood forms into whatever the navigator, whatever they look like. Thinking the Talaxu navigators from Dune or whatever.
It is.
Okay.
Right. So the navigators are most commonly enormous worms.
Oh, okay.
And they and basically the two of you, so you cut yourself, you say whatever the words, you call out into the ether, and part of your domain bleeds into this what's the word I'm looking for? This lake of ichor that begins to seep into your domain and frays at the edges, and then you could see those edges actually are this enormous round orifice, right? It's very toothy. It's and it just sort of oozes into your domain along this little lake.
I hate this part.
And you know that in order to walk the whispering path, you have to step into it.
Yeah, this is why I hate this part. Yeah.
Navigators are much like beings of shadow, which are kind of the bad guys, right? They're they're creatures of essence that are awakened to the mortal world, and they often they'd sort of be akin to Lovecraftian creatures, that come over into the world. And navigators, they're between both realms. They're neither one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
They're in both, right? So that's what makes them perfect for this, right? Is your command over them, and you stepping into their maws, only to be eventually, after you walk the path, disgorged into the realm of flesh. The bell rings. And as you're walking the path, which, it might have some sense, but these beings are unfathomably enormous, right? So you're just walking in a dark forest now, which is still in the path. You're still in the navigator. It's just how you're sort of manifesting the path. And you're taking this road until eventually you come upon sort of a copse of trees, this glade, right, that's kind of open, and you can see sitting on a glen, on some sort of knoll, is a being, and that being looks like several sets
Angelic sort of
wings, sitting on no, probably standing, actually. The differentiation between its flesh and its robes is kind of ephemeral, and when it speaks with this sort of like hollow, tinny echo that is strangely compelling, right? And you know that on the path there's almost always a guardian. It takes many forms. It's sort of a manifestation of your ability to get from the realm of essence into that transition, right? The being says, again, all imperious and echoey, but distant, as if like its mouth is moving, but you hear it reverberating off the mountains, I am Galman. You are treading on dangerous ground.
Aren't they always?
I try to see if I knew anything about him.
Yes, Galmond is actually an angel, and so angels are not things, right? Angels are there are certain things in the realm of flesh that mortals expect beings of essence to look like.
A thought form, yeah.
Right, but they're not. It's sort of like the dreaming, creating a being of essence, not just a being of flesh, but a being of essence that's there to kind of have a role for mortals. So it's actually stuck into this interesting place because it's not supposed to be in the realm of flesh, but it's not real like other beings of essence have these immortal, persistent selves. But this angel would actually be swept away with the cycle because it's part of the dreaming as well. And says, I cannot let you pass. This quest that you are on is far too dangerous.
I can't let you stop me.
I'm going to I step forward and I'm going to try to use the charm.
Great. Yeah. What do you want to?
Well, my presence is only 3, but so maybe it's better for me to. Do I have any awareness as to why this creature would be, or insight into? I'd like to, I say to him essentially, your concern for us is so greatly appreciated. Who and why do you care for us?
My concern is not for you. My concern is not for you. My concern is for the faithful. What you do, where you go, what you are about to embark on is going to have you cross paths with the dream in a way that the veil, the illusion, right, is important for mortals to maintain. And I am concerned that the two of you, bulls in the proverbial glass house, totally mixing up his analogies, will not tread lightly enough.
Well, I have no interest in disturbing the lives of mortals. In fact, I'm here to protect them.
I'm only concerned with vengeance. But I won't say that. I'll kind of just kind of look over at him, just kind of hold my tongue, but stare at the angel,
In a very non-threatening manner, I kind of move towards him, the hands open, lowered, and it's my goal is simply to help those who are in need, and I have been called. Right. And I'm going to try to use that in an impassioned way to convince him to rethink his decision.
So make a charm roll. So it's 3 dice, and then you add your charm.
Ooh.
All right.
Well, I got 4.
So you got 2 twos, there's 4, a 6. That's not quite enough. That doesn't actually even reach routine. A routine is 8. He bellows do not trifle with me, I have seen your work in the past. You have no goodwill towards faith.
All right. Well, I guess it's my turn. I'll stand my ground and bellow right back. I'm going to use Intimidate. So this is very unlike characters I usually play, but I'm fine with that. So I'm using what, presence?
Presence, yeah.
Okay.
What's your presence?
4.
4. Okay, so 4 dice.
And then plus 5.
Okay. All right, so you
two
got
4s. So
2
8
4s.
plus
So 8 and 5 is 13. You're like the silk glove and the mail and the gauntlet, right? Great. What manifests? Remember you're a being of essence.
Well, yeah, my wings probably flare behind me, so kind of kind of almost in parallel to the angel, and I imagine I have a sword or something like that.
Sure, sword. What's it?
Sword in front
is
of
it
me.
What's it look like?
It's probably like a very an anime sword where it's so big that it seems like
it's awesome.
Fall forward, but I just don't. Yeah. And just drive it into the ground, and
Right. What is your command?
To stand down.
Stand down.
Let us pass.
Right. He does shrink a little bit. It says, and a little more timidly, the echo is a little further away. It says, stalkers, you send my kind into the oblivion. I just ask that you be wary of that power. And he kind of shrinks into the cusp.
I'll say I'll let my friend lead, but of course, if that doesn't work, then out comes the sword.
There you go. And he literally just moves. All right. And the bell rings. Dong. As you can see this dark forest transforming into city streets, you could see beyond. You can see what you might guess is probably normally I wouldn't tell you this, but just to give you a sense, 1970s Detroit. And you see an enormous church, right? A big Catholic church amidst a area of squalor. But before that happens, you see coming from the black skeletal trees descends down these what you might imagine would be spiders, but without abdomens. They're just sort of heads and eyes with legs, and secreting, almost dripping from the ends of their legs. There are 8, sometimes seemingly many more legs. Is this white substance that is ostensibly their webs. And that while at first you might be revulsed by them, what they are here to do is have your will bend them towards creating your vessel, the form you will take for this hunt,
Right.
A mortal illusion, right? This is them giving you substance to your spirit form. Right? All right. And in doing so, what's going to happen is, first off, you're going to describe what your person looks like. Second off, you're going to establish what your physical stats are. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this is actually based off of your willpower. What that's going to do is you have 3 stats. You're going to want to write these down. Dexterity, attributes: dexterity, fortitude, and strength. And they start at 3, and then you spend your willpower. You allocate your willpower amidst the 3 stats. So what is Mara's form?
I imagine Mara's kind of like a fairly tall, like built woman, kind of like Karlak from Baldur's Gate 3, but not like the red skin and stuff, but like that sort of build and, very present.
How tall?
Like 6 foot, probably.
6 foot? 6
like
foot?
5'11", something like that.
How are you dressed?
Khakis and a tank top, probably.
Khakis and a tank top, okay.
Kind of innocuous looking, but also like, somewhat ripped at the same time.
Sounds good. So you look like you are a bodybuilder. Like, what role do you look like you play in society?
A lesbian. No. Role, I don't know.
Is Mara envisioning that at all, or are you just going for presence and
yeah, mostly present and like focused on her goal. I don't think she probably. She cares about humans, but in a very abstract sort of way.
Sure. You're here to drink milk and kick ass.
Right.
You're all out of milk. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
What is Elion's form?
An Italian guy from around the way. He's a working class guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's likes to go out and hit the clubs on the weekends, but other than that, and he's kind of bitching and moaning about his job.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Yeah. Does he have like your shirt open?
Yeah, he's got a shirt open. He's got a gold chain. He's got the medallion.
Is it a white suit or
no? It doesn't have a white suit, but he's got it's got the big paisley top and the bell bottom jeans.
Awesome.
He's a good looking guy. Yeah,
awesome.
He's got his hair.
Yeah, right. It's all about the hair.
It's really
fantastic. Okay, cool. So you show up. This is the point. The bell rings as you the forest disappears, and these 2 people are standing in a street. Behind you is a burnt out lot. There's several tenements. There's a chain link fence that advertisements of various types have been sort of shoved into the links. But behind that, there's tenements. And the tenements look pretty worse for wear. They definitely do not look inhabitable. Like, they don't look like they're safe, but it's very clear people that are living in them. There are a number of row homes in the periphery, right? These would be sort of like the local middle class, very often, very likely laborers, right? But what dominates the whole scene is this egregiously huge church, right? It's relatively well appointed. It has a wall around it, and it has several other buildings, probably like a rectory, a convent, as well as a school. It's very, very common. Most of the kids from the neighborhood very, very likely go to this school, right?
I know, look, I'm like my peeps.
Right. Where would you like to go?
I'll probably turn to you and be like, who are we here to look to get?
was here to find a young lady.
All right. You shouldn't have too hard of a time tracking down the house.
Visually, I know context.
Yeah, visually, you know some context. You know that she lives in one of those row homes.
Okay.
And the two of you knock, I'm assuming, on the door. She opens the door. What seems like probably a week's journey to the two of you took no temporal time whatsoever. So it's pretty much just about the same time that she called. She made the call. She's sobbing and she's like through a screen door, right? Saying, can I help you? And beyond, you could see that it's a very 70s style plush green rugs. You could see a large crucifix on the wall in a paneled apartment or living room. You could see that there's plastic covering floral couches.
It's my grandmother's house. So you're fully up to speed on what I saw, and like
just a woman sobbing.
A woman sobbing, but clearly something going on. Now, if we were on a more ethereal plane, I would be my loving personality that I am and embrace her. But I think that would be kind of weird. So my question to you is: do we want to go and our car broke down? We want to use a telephone and start a conversation, or do we go and say, I'm from around the way in this neighborhood, and I'm going to ask you cute questions, or do you think we should come out and like speak directly to her?
I mean, Mara's inclination would probably be to go straight through and be like, I am from another world, kind of thing. But like, she also knows to kind of hold back. So like, she's probably like trying to seem unassuming, kind of like stand behind you with her arms crossed and looking intimidating, even though she's trying not to.
So I think
Mara's saying you get the lead.
Right. Yeah. So I guess what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to read the situation. Like, is this a person who I can say, child, what is wrong? I mean, I can't use that language. So, so I say, hey, so when we originally saw her, she was outside the house, right?
Her mother had just left and she was just inside. Like she had just closed the door.
Yeah. So I say, hey, we saw you, we saw that kind of interaction and I want to make sure you're okay. You okay?
Right. Make a charm roll. Let's see how it's 3 dice for you. See how she is interacting. Strangers showing up. Yep. There you go. 6 plus 2, 8. Yep. 8's what you needed. She's feeling kind of vulnerable, right? And so she's a little hesitant and she tries to like put on a strong facade, but then like breaks down.
Okay.
And you get the sense it's probably pretty safe to kind of walk inside, The three of you enter into the living room, like sit down as she's basically crying and trying to contextualize everything that's going on. This is kind of weird. And she's like, look, she's like stuck between her upbringing and like practicality. On one hand, she's like, who are you? Why, right. Kind of deal. But on the other hand, she's like, can I get you something to drink?
Right. So one of the things I'm kind of curious is, what am I sensing from the environment, from her? Like, where there was a calling. I experienced a call. What is this?
The enigma is existing somewhere
in this space. So am I picking up on any of that? Because I have sensitivity.
You do.
I have sensitivity.
You do have sensitivity. Okay, go ahead. And so basically, she starts telling you a tale, sort of like for lack of a better term, a little exposition, where she says that there has been this new charismatic movement moving through the church, that her mother and many of the church, I don't want to say elders, but like the core like people, the diehards, right, who show up every single Sunday, and bring their families, right, have participated in. And at first, she's holiday religious, she calls it, and she says, but lately wounds have been showing up on my mother.
Like stigmata?
No, more like she kind of eyes you for a second, because that's like a big word for the woman in front of her. But
like the first thing I said to her, also,
right, right, like stigmata,
right, exactly.
No, nothing. I mean, seemingly no, but that's what the father has suggested is going on. But she's a little like, she'll like cover them up or whatever the case is and just try to pass them off. But I know something awful is going on over there. I know that's strange. It's a church. It's it's our livelihood. It's our food. Like it's the center of our culture here. But I don't know what to do about it. I feel powerless.
Does this mean I have to go to church? Say it again.
All right. So I asked to see the mother's room, and I just go and see if there's anything that I can, obviously I'm looking around the living room, but in the room, if there's a Bible, if there's anything, and see by picking up any energy in there.
Again, she's hesitant, but for some reason she's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
But if she needs to be convinced, I will say, I know you may not understand this, but you called us to be here to you called us to assist you and help your family. And if I need to another roll.
No, I believe in let it ride. This is all part of, but she's still hesitant.
Yeah, sure.
So my role playing of her is you only rolled an 8, right? Which is just kind of what you needed. So she's a little like, but so she brings you in, she turns on pulls a little cord and turns on the light. It's a pretty stereotypical, very austere. There's a big picture of the Sacred Heart above the bed. There is a Bible on the nightstand. It's a big, thick, leather-bound Bible.
I pick it up and I open it and see.
Very likely a King James, but when you open it up, you can see that there are scribblings of notes in some of the chapters. At first, you didn't notice it. You're just, it's a Bible. It's, very thin pages. But as you get to certain areas, you can see that there's written in black pen are interpretations of passages and little notes, and often referring to, so I don't know if you guys know this. I know you know this. I don't know if you know this, but there's other books of the Bible called the Apocrypha. So this is a book with the full Apocrypha in it.
It's like the Gospel of Thomas is just written in the margins.
Okay. And talking, it's very Catholic guilt oriented. It's very penance and suffering. Good works aren't enough. That, pain and, bearing the cross is what leads us in our families.
I'll ask her, is this your handwriting?
Oh no, I'll be honest, I haven't lifted a Bible since, catechism.
So it's your mother's handwriting?
Oh, probably? This is her room, yeah. Yes, yeah.
Well, I know, but someone else could have written in the book. Okay.
Oh, and she says, and then she says, and she kind of looks really pensive, looks around, and she says, but then there's this. And she reaches under the bed and pulls out a chest. It's approximately about 4 feet long.
It's a big chest.
It's about 1.5 feet wide. It's about 8 or 9 inches deep. It's leather, and it's like bound in like brass, and has a lock on it.
My eyebrow kind of goes up at that. I'm like, that's
She says,
something.
the key is around my mother's neck at all times. It doesn't look new. It's not like ancient or anything, you know?
So
But-
she doesn't have the key.
No, it's just her mother has it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I could probably or possibly break it open, but that's probably not the ideal way of going about it. So I defer to your subtleties.
Yeah. Can I phase the object so we can see what's inside of it?
You could, remember you have dissipate, right? So you could conceivably phase and look into it.
Or even reach into it. Yeah.
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 Okay, let's try that.
All right. Is it the glimmer guns to make that phase also?
Phase objects, yeah.
Phase objects. So maybe you can, maybe you can have them bring it out,
Okay.
kind of idea. Brings out a barbed cat of nine tails. That is, in its own right, is stretched out just short of the length of the
I
chest.
kind of mumble in the bathroom. I'm into some kinky shit.
and
That's an implement.
and clearly has like some bits of flesh and blood on it. And Ramira like goes white and gasps, seeing
I
this.
say, have you seen this before?
I had no idea.
That's I repeat again. That's an implement.
And, my 5 keys to humanity, I show her compassion, building a trust and
Yeah.
same. And then I'll phase the object back into the box.
Sounds good.
Do you want to know what the fallen are, little one? In a sense, they are angels, but not the angels your mom imagines she prays to. Brass trumpets picnicking in the clouds. In their true essence, they are great swirling engines of wing and blood, fiery eyes that peer around the corners between worlds. Dark, radiant things conjured from fresh battlefields. A Frankenstein's Valkyrie, forever crashing to Midgard. What grief demands their hate? What vast cannibal hunger?
Welcome to the Fallen Cycle. This is a universe full of secrets, waiting for those brave or foolhardy enough to seek them out. Discover more about the myth-punk Fallen Cycle universe at fallencycle.com.
All right. Bell rings. Right? You're at the church. You notice part of your sensitivity sort of brings. Do you have sensitivity at all, by the way? Not just you. So part of your sensitivity, you notice that sends you in 2 different directions. Sends you, there's something odd, something clearly supernatural going on in the tenement building, and clearly something very supernatural going on in the church.
We'll go to the church, I think.
Yeah, church.
Church. So you're standing between the two. You turn. You actually see this church. The wall has a gate, a big wrought iron gate. It is unlocked currently, and you push it, and it creaks open as you go. Where do you want to? Do you want to go into the church, or do you want to explore one of the other buildings, or do you want to go towards where you're pulled?
I think I want to go towards where we're pulled.
All right,
Yeah.
got to make a sensitivity roll and see where that goes. So sensitivity, I don't know.
I got a 6 plus a 2, so an 8.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, it takes you a little while to wander, right? It's starting to get dark, but at some point in time, you come upon a courtyard, sort of between buildings, and the courtyard is very dimly lit by one street lamp that's over the whole thing. There's an old basketball hoop in the courtyard as well. And in the center is a fountain. It's a shallow fountain. The wall itself, probably about 12 feet wide, but only like the wall itself is only about 1.5 feet tall. And then it's sunk in a fair amount. And you can see that there are flowers and all sorts of accoutrement, like there's candles and there's crosses, old books, even some clothing. There's some chalices and bottles of liquor and like all sorts of things gathering at the base of this wall.
Okay.
And inside the fountain, there is a statue of some figure. The two of you probably don't know unless you want to make a history roll. Go ahead. That would probably be insight.
Okay. What if I don't have history?
I have history.
You have history? All right, so you should probably roll.
Okay,
6.
just
a
a
6.
6 plus 2, so 8. Okay.
8. Okay, sounds good. This is a saint of some sort. This is a church to Saint Agatha. So you can only imagine that this is probably Agatha, but that is really all you probably know.
Okay.
You probably don't know what her significance or her, you vaguely recall that saints have a role in mortal society as, being aligned. They're in the Catholic Church, they're intercessors. So posthumously, the saints pray for the congregants, generally towards their...
So this is it's like a standard statue. It's not like weeping blood or anything like that.
It is, in fact, weeping blood. That is, in fact, exactly what's going on.
Okay.
Is that, in fact, from every orifice, it is...
There's the problem.
It is a woman. She's standing with her hands out, right? She's in some sort of like medieval getup, and her ears, mouth, nose, and eyes are all weeping blood, and you can see enough that it has filled the fountain.
Wow. Well, I take note of that. I immediately move towards the books that were there, and I start looking over the books to see my knowledge and stuff. Well,
it's really just like old family Bibles and things like that. You get a sense that people are like leaving tribute of some sort.
Offerings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now...
So this is the enigma. This is the manifestation of the realm of essence bleeding through into the realm of flesh.
So this is where I use my mend?
Yes. However, while you can mend the rift now and here, it will not last long as the unbidden still exists.
So we know where the enigma is. And so by deduction, I can assume that the unbidden is in the towers?
You're not really certain.
Okay.
You do know that there's it's not a bad guess because there's something going on over there.
Right.
You hear shouting coming out from like within the church. You're one of the walls to this courtyard is the church, and through the stained glass windows you can hear yelling, which you realize after a little while is some sort of sermon. Apparently someone is shouting some sort of homily, talking about suffering, talking about the signs God has given us and penance, and how...
My question is whether the priests or whoever's running this thing is influenced by something that's the source, or if they are themselves the source.
I would like a good inclusive look at this too.
So
we circle around and merge into the congregation quiet.
So you want to head into the church?
Yeah.
All right. You go in. There's not many people here. Somebody you
I'm looking to see if it's Ramirez's mother's.
yes, somebody you recognize as Ramirez's mother is very clearly right up front. Older Italian woman, you know, in a everybody is dressed rather conservatively, right? There's all the men are wearing like brown suits and blue and various darker hues. All of the women are in dresses. Many of them are wearing hats or bonnets of some sort. The congregation, largely African American, but it's fairly mixed. And you could tell that there's definitely segregation within this little group. You're not getting you probably don't know enough about the history to know if they're self-segregating or it's compelled, but standing up on a raised pulpit, one of those that has its own staircase, right, that goes into this octagonal piece, and he has in front of him an enormous Bible, and he's got his sleeves rolled up, right, and he's in a the traditional clergy's collar. He's just like preaching fire and brimstone, and like, and if you listen, long enough, you get hints of sort of like hell on earth, and that avoiding an eternity of damnation means suffering in this world.
So should I roll a sensitivity check, or can I do a? Do I have a balance?
Scanning for supernatural?
Yep, sensitivity would be the appropriate. You have,
2 sixes.
Oh wow,
3 sixes.
3 sixes.
Yeah. I bet you that's better than routine.
You recognize this being immediately. You can see through their facade. This is known as the Herald of Penance.
He hasn't met me yet. I'm the Herald of Vengeance.
You're familiar with this being. The Penitent Herald was once tasked to managing the cycles of atonement and forgiveness, ensuring that mortals could find peace through penance. But over time, the Herald became obsessed with making penance an endless cycle, believing that true forgiveness can only come through constant suffering and devotion. Abandoning their role, they crossed into the realm of flesh to impose their endless penance on mortals.
So I'm here to bring the balance, then.
I'm here to bring the balance. What do you guys want to do?
Now, you said there are not a lot of people here, right?
There's probably about 2 dozen.
Is there a point to confronting them and having them, or is it murder, kill, death?
My character's impulse would be to go straight for the pastor and like to hell with the whatever. But that's my inclination. That's my character's inclination.
That is what the angel was concerned about, was the faith of these mortals, like breaking the veil enough where you just basically start attacking and having this supernatural battle in front of them, could I mean, in its own right, create an enigma, could make a tear in the rift, as well as imperil the sanity and safety of these mortals.
Right. This is the only reason why I'm letting you take the lead with it. My character, I mean, should be kind of like chomping at the bit, but if you say hold for the moment, then I will.
Well, I relay exactly my concerns. I think this is what Galeron's concern was.
So then we should separate him,
and then send him back.
Do you want to wait until and confront him in his quarters? Do you want to?
I think we confront him in his quarters, or we wait until
Why don't we present ourselves as kind of like new aspirants or whatever they call it,
and he may recognize us. So
maybe.
I mean, he'll know we're not from around here. what we can do is we can wait till the end of the what's the name, and then approach him, because that is standard in the process of approaching him at the end.
Right.
Sounds good. Do you want to be hidden from him? Your
For now,
natures?
yes.
All right. So both of you make stealth rolls.
Nope.
I don't have stealth. So what's the stat that it's off of?
It's going to be off of dexterity.
Okay, I got 5 in dexterity.
I got a 5 in dexterity too.
Okay, so 5.
5 is your high. Yeah. 5 plus, that's it, 5, right? Okay. And
6.
you don't have stealth either?
No, I don't.
Okay, 2 6s.
Oh, 2 6.
So you got 12.
Right.
Oh.
You blend in. You look, but you don't.
I'm guessing that my character's still kind of just staring at him without blinking, just I'm being normal. This is me being normal.
Right. Then he starts talking about sinners. Then he starts talking about people with low moral value and compass, and that and pride, and points like you, and points at you.
I just keep staring him down and go, yes.
Move over.
But get some space between you and says clearly is trying to call you out.
Yeah, I actually stand up and take a couple steps towards him.
Unrepentant, yeah. And several of the congregants sort of step out and put themselves between.
Yeah, I'm not trying charging him.
No, I know, but they're, especially the guys, but there's a couple women in there too that you suffer from pride, child. You need to bow before me. Go ahead and make a defense roll for me.
Well, no, actually, that
15.
Yeah,
okay.
15 plus defend is 6, so 21.
All right. You can feel these spiritual chains kind of come up from the ground to try to wrap themselves around you, and you're able to how do you defend yourself against
I
them?
imagine I just stepped through them they're like aluminum foil. I just kind of
Okay.
With 21, I'm guessing.
Right. So your willpower, they just collapse and rust.
But you also see my character's fixating on him now. And I haven't fully engaged in attack, but I'm sort of getting more and more ready to just.
But he does this, steps back for a second, what do you want to do?
Right now, there's a part of me that's through my knowledge, I'm sure I know how to bind somebody or banish them. I think that's the one. So is it possible to start that, or do I?
He has to be in his true form, and he has to be whittled down
you
to
could
nothing.
scare the humans away.
Yeah, I can try to do that. Can I translocate to the stairs behind him?
Behind him?
The stairs that lead up.
Yeah.
That level? Okay, I'm going to translocate over there.
Go for it.
Okay.
What's your? I think translocate. I think is going to be insight.
Okay.
2 4 2 5s, so 10.
2 5 10. Okay.
No problem at all.
Okay.
You just whoop and appear at behind the stairs.
Yeah. And then down. I'm going to slowly go up behind him and maintain my. I know I don't have stealth, but obviously I'm going to be as quiet as possible.
Yeah. What do you want to do to him?
Conjure. All right. So what do I have to do to conjure something?
Nothing. You could do it.
All right. So
what do you want to conjure?
The only thing that comes to mind is a candelabra, a heavy candelabra. So I conjure a candelabra, from
like a staff kind, a standing one, or a table
like they have in the church. It's
a table one.
Yeah, a table one.
Okay, not a freestanding
cast iron,
sure.
Heavy gold crusted candelabra. Sure. And I walk up and I crash across it. I'm completely aware that I'm violating my promise to.
Yep.
What's his name?
Make an attack roll.
Okay.
No, I'm approaching at the same time.
Okay.
5 plus. So I got a 6.
Two sixes. 12.
So 12 plus 2. 14.
14.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
The grate pops open.
So now what's your strength?
5.
Go ahead and roll 5 dice for me. 12. All right.
12.
Still, 12 is good. Yeah, you clock him one, but it's you like hit him in the back of the head, right? And he actually goes flying off of the pulpit and like lands really awkwardly. Like his neck is at a weird angle, one of his arms is at a weird angle, and he like hisses at you all, and then like sits up for a second, and then you can see that he's starting to like regenerate.
Oh. Then I'm going to use my savage attack.
Okay.
Leap on top of him.
All right. Okay. So you're rolling. Right. You're rolling
5
your
dice
dex,
plus
5
6.
dice plus 6.
Oh, 2 5. So
Five.
10, 16.
16. 16 is
plus
very
the
good.
savage.
You absolutely do damage to him. Normally, I'm the kind of person who, like, I'll prorate damage based on how well you hit kind of deal. This is definitely a roll for damage kind of system. We're just going to do that for the time being. So what is your strength?
My strength's 5. Or 6, sorry.
6. So roll 6 dice, and you get 3 extra dice because of savage.
Okay. So yeah, 15 plus 3, so 18.
All right, 18. So again, while he's standing up and he's like, he's sort of like he's on at first he was on the side, and then he was like, sort of like unnaturally goes to his knees, like bones and sinew are kind of collecting. And then he that move that Michael Jackson used to make going from his knees up onto his toes. Like he sort of like unnaturally does that, only slowly, not, and not with a And some of the congregants, a lot of them are between you and him, right? And so don't see what's going on. But a couple of them are like, what's going on? A couple of them really only notice you and notice you up there with this big ass candelabra, and you just clock the priest. And you just like surge through. Now, some of his protection are his congregants.
Right.
So there's some armor value there. It's basically going through soft targets. But you do manage to like catch one of his arms with your sword after like tearing through several mortals.
Yeah, I'm trying to hurt them, but I push them out of the way kind of thing. Right?
He is going to...
He's still in his mortal form?
He's still in his mortal form. You haven't quite shaved enough damage off. Also, you both understand, like, various Unbidden have crazy powers, right? So clearly he has some sort of regenerative power going on. This is not normal. This is not your first rodeo, and you know that he's probably pulling power from somewhere that's allowing him to regenerate.
Right.
You're not entirely certain what that's from. But he says, by their suffering, you are redeemed. And all of the congregants all turn towards you. All just turn and make a defense roll.
Plus 6. So 8 plus 6, 14.
14. 14's pretty good. They don't. You're able to kind of shrug off the mortals, but in the meantime, he's starting to beeline
I'm
out of there.
I'm leaping off with that.
They have to get By the way, I totally while this is a horror thing, I totally you're in your 70s outfit. I feel there's a freeze frame. You're like,
absolutely.
A little disco ball action.
My medallion is flying.
Right.
And I said, "Be gone, you vile beast! You release these people."
All right, go ahead and make
a little ethereal for a 70s outfit, but that's who I am. 666. Yikes! I already said
no. All right, now
I miss.
Here's the thing that you all have karma. You could spend a point of karma
definitely
to reroll.
Okay, the whole thing.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Definitely spending a point of karma.
A 2 4,
fours,
8,
eight, yeah.
but you don't have attack, right?
No, I have two attacks.
Yeah.
Oh, you have 2 attacks, so you have a
10.
10. So because he's running, right? Jumping attack's a little more difficult, but quite honestly, like rule of cool is more important. You tag him. It's not you're gonna have what's called a die cap on your damage, because you're doing this sort of difficult maneuver. But so go ahead and roll damage. So what's your strength?
5.
Your strength is 5. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll 5 dice, but you're going to ignore 6s. And 1 5. So you're 5. So it only takes 5 points of damage, which is not going to get past this fortitude. You hit him. The force of the blow does send him sprawling. And he turns around and go ahead and make a defense roll with willpower. You have 2 4s, 3 4s.
3 4s.
So 16? Yeah. All right, awesome. Again, the two of you, like he has these, he throws out his hands and these barbed hooks sort of like go in and begin to kind of like try to like leech out your essence, but you... but you're using willpower, right? Because right now these are essence attacks that the other people don't see, kind of idea, and you're able to like hold them off. You know what I mean? Like they don't quite find purchase or like slide off of you, and he bellows like it's like
I'm going to try to use his distraction with that to bring my sword down on him, and hopefully.
So you're going to try to escape the
kind of leap in the air,
right? Yeah. So out of the crowd of people. All right, sounds good. Let's go ahead.
5. So 5 plus my attack is 6 or 11.
11.
Plus savage. But I guess that's for damage, right?
That's for damage. Yeah. All right. You are able to sort of muscle out of the crowd and like launch yourself through the air. You land just short of him though. Your attack itself is not successful. Right. But you do manage to like get away from the crowd. And you plant your sword in like the tiled floor, cracks appear in the floor. And again, like this crowd of people who were just like schoolmarms and dock workers now have like taken on different visages. You actually like can see some of their teeth are kind of sharpened, a couple of them. Some of them seem to have claws, which would probably indicate to you that some of them, if not all of them, are shadows, are minions, right? And in sort of mortal form.
Is Romero? Is it Romero's mom? Or is she still Romero's mom?
Let's see here. That's a good question. Make a sensitivity roll.
4. Yeah, 4. 4 plus 2 is 6.
6.
So not.
No, she seems perfectly normal.
Okay,
She
so
doesn't.
she's just horrified.
She's not horrified. She's part of the people.
Oh, she is part.
And her whole demeanor's changed, but she doesn't look like she's probably a shadow. It's very likely that
so
she's
now I'm torn.
Just a human.
Do I save her?
So there's about half of them are just normal people, but being controlled by the Herald.
And I'm not torn.
I know you're here.
I'm here to destroy him.
But that's my job.
Right.
All right.
There's a part of me that needs to save these people. But we also need to get this guy. And there's a part of me that kind of feels like, it's in good hands. Am I in striking distance of him?
Yeah. Oh, 100%
okay.
you are.
Yeah, then I will just continue. I will try, one last time.
Sounds good. If both of you fail on this attack roll, he's very likely to get away.
Yeah.
Just so you're aware. He's just trying to make himself out the door, and he's using the people to kind of,
I can track him locally later.
Yeah.
But for now,
2 4
2 4 is 8 plus
your attack.
Attack is 10.
10. Yeah, not quite enough to you search for it. You like lean back to haul off and hit him with the candelabra, and you can feel arms around you, like kind of pulling you back, right? And just
I guess I'm going to do the same.
Go ahead.
Yeah, 2, 4, so 8 plus 6, 14.
So 14 is enough. Not quite as much as 10, but 14 is enough. Again, you have to like fight through guys, so you are going to have a die cap of 6.
Okay.
So go ahead and roll your damage.
3 5s.
3 5s. So 15. 15 minus his fortitude. Yeah. So you hit him hard enough, right? Your sword goes through his chest, and in doing so kind of like vibrates, and he like looks at you, and he like grabs your shirt, you know, and you could see that he starts to like stretch his skin, you know, and like the area around the blade starts to glow as his vitality goes to 0. And he like pushes away from you, and now he's this sort of Cenobite-esque, you know, opulent being, like surrounded by cat o' nine tails and whips and chains.
That's
and
crazy.
you know,
Time to bind him.
Time to bind him. Yep.
go for it.
All right.
And you do have to sacrifice a point of vitality for this. But
Oh, I got a 6 though.
double 6s.
Double 6s plus my
Bind.
bind is 5. So
Hoorah!
yeah.
That clearly beats his resolve, and he again sort of like explodes for a second, and then implodes into this like ball of light that it just, you know, that you can like basically maybe turn the candelabra into a cage or
It's
something.
almost like
that.
Ghostbuster if you
Yeah.
throw the thing
There you
out.
go. Right into the candelabra.
All right. We'll end there just to get a good sense of like where this is going. There are a couple more steps, primarily you doing the reverse trip.
Right
You
back,
probably engage with Galman again.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And then throw the being into the Whispering Vault. And that's
That's cool.
Whispering Vault.
All right. That's
Gotcha.
cool. That's fun. I like that.
Yeah.
You have been listening to another episode of the Modern Mythology Podcast. We hope we gave you something new to think about, that you can bring to your RPGs, writing, and other character-based games and art forms. Produced by James Kershaw. Soundtrack by Scott Landis and James Kershaw. For more information about this episode, articles, or links to our other related projects, visit modernmythology.net.